Welcome to everybody on this beautiful morning. We're going to talk this morning about one of the most painful subjects, certainly of my lifetime, the conflict that began October 7, that led to the death of 1,200 Israelis as Hamas attacked, the capture of more than 200 hostages, and then a war that's continued now for 9 months with an estimated 30,000 Palestinians dead. By most estimates, a majority of those civilians. We're going to try to see this painful story whole. We're going to see it in two segments. First, my conversation with former Prime Minister Olmert, who, as you know, was Israel's prime minister from 2006 to 2009, came as close as any Israeli prime minister to making a real peace deal with the Palestinians, also was leading Israel during the 2006 war in Lebanon. Then we'll turn to Ambassador Tom Nides and Ambassador Dina Kawar for a second panel discussion looking at these issues. Prime Minister Olmert, let me start at the beginning of this story, October 7. I think we'd all be interested to know what you were doing on that day, what you remember of the first hours and days after the attack, and why you think Israel was so unprepared for what happened on that day.
Thank you, David. I was with my family, almost all of my family, except for 5 of them who are serving in the army. We were on a family vacation from the 1st of October to the 7th of October, scheduled to fly on the 7th of October from Sicily back to Israel. Waking up very early in the morning, immediately I could see the WhatsApps, 150 of them, talking about terrible things that are happening on those very seconds. And we woke up all the family and we understood that Israel is in the middle of a war. Now, the one thing which hit me then and keep coming back and forth throughout this period was I have a WhatsApp group with my classmates from grade 1. And I'm well over 70. So you can imagine that there are quite a lot of years that we are. And one of them is a member of Kibbutz Be'eri. And while we were driving to the airport, we got these messages, all of the class, but I got them in Sicily on my way to the airport. Please do something, call the police, call the army, where is the country, where is the army, they are killing us, they are shooting us, and so on. The end of the story on her particular case is that her husband was murdered, and she was lying next to him, next to his corpse, for 10 hours, bleeding, pretending to be dead, and in a miraculous way, she was rescued. So her story is a great tragedy on the one hand, terrible sense of helplessness. And on the other hand...
Why, on the second half of my question, as you look back, why was the country, Israel, so strong in so many ways? Why was it so unprepared that day?
I'll try to answer all your questions from the end, rather than, make a lange Meise, as we say, a long story. Arrogance. You know what is arrogance? Arrogance. We, startup nation, we are the smartest guys on earth. Who are these Palestinians? They can outsmart us. I'm Bibi Netanyahu. I'm the greatest leader of all times. Who is Yahya Sinwar?
So that's a good direct answer.
I told you I try to be concise.
Concise, and you didn't mince words, as we say. So this morning, there were 2 important things that were published. One, many people here know about. In the New York Times, former Prime Minister Ehud Barak, former Mossad director Tamir Pardo, other very prominent Israelis, published an op-ed piece saying Prime Minister Netanyahu should be disinvited from appearing before Congress. In Israel today, a piece was published in Haaretz by former Prime Minister Ehud Olmert. Prime Minister, tell us what you said in Haaretz today.
I said what you all think, that I very meticulously line up a series of what I thought was violations of fundamental principles of Israel committed by the Prime Minister. And I said, I accuse you of doing this, of doing this, of doing this, all the things that you know, of forsaking the hostages, of extending the war endlessly, of trying to have a comprehensive confrontation in the north border of Israel, and so on and so forth. However, I have to say, look, my article is very important because I wrote it. But the article in the New York Times, I have to say, is more important. One, because it's published in the New York Times, and of course there is a series of writers which was very important to present to the American public opinion, the policymakers, and particularly to the President and the White House and the Democrats, that Israel is not just one voice that comes from the government, that there is a different voice, I think more powerful, more significant, more important, and therefore they didn't want to have two prime ministers, particularly with the same private name, Ehud, on the list of writers, so they have one. But what they wrote speaks from my heart. I wrote to Chuck Schumer, the majority leader, after he made that famous speech on the floor of the Senate where he criticized Netanyahu in a very blunt manner, unheard of, perhaps in the history of the Senate, at least in the history of the relations between prominent Jews in American politics and the Israeli government. I sent him a letter of congratulations. I say to him, you spoke from the heart of millions of Israelis. And therefore, the appeal of now very prominent Israelis, really outstanding Israelis, the former head of Mossad, the former prime minister, the essayist and the writer David Grossman, and the others, I think is a very important and significant request from friends of America that respect what America is doing to the state of Israel, and that they think that if Bibi will be disinvited to the Congress, it will help bring peace much faster than otherwise. And that's why I hope that the Democrats, I hope that the two parties, I hope that all of them will listen very carefully to what they have to say. No one can accuse Barak, Pardo, Grossman and all the others that are signed on this article that they are not patriots of the state of Israel. Okay? They are. If they write what they write, they are. It comes from the heart of the people that were fighting for Israel for 75 years.
And just to be clear, on the record here with these cameras, you would join in that same statement. You think it's appropriate to disinvite the Prime Minister?
Absolutely. Absolutely. I think that it's obvious that President Biden is not part of this invitation, that it's not to his liking to have Netanyahu now argue with him at a joint session of Congress, trying to argue the President of the United States after what the President has been doing for the last 9 months, which is admirable, unheard of, unprecedented in the history of the relations between our two countries. We salute President Biden. We're not going to fight with him, and he should know that the majority of Israelis would have voted for him Prime Minister right away.
He could. It may be that he could use some votes from somewhere.
You'd rather go on with his war.
So I want to ask you about a very political question, also a question that goes to the heart of what Israel is. The Israeli Supreme Court on Tuesday issued a ruling saying that ultra-Orthodox Israelis, Jews, should not be exempt from military service. And there were many analyses immediately saying that this ruling would lead the government of Bibi Netanyahu to fall because it's split between those who support the exemption and those who oppose it. You're smart about politics. Do you think the government will fall over this issue? And beyond the Supreme Court decision, what's ahead? How long is this government going to last? And what comes next?
First of all, I hope it will fall. I hope it will fall. I don't think that they decided on the matter because they wanted this outcome. They are free of any such considerations, I hope. There is one very simple thing. State of Israel is in war now for 9 months. There is a section of the population which says, when we are studying Torah and we are reciting Psalms from early morning to late at night, we contribute to the fighting a lot more than holding a gun and shooting. And then I started inquiries. And I asked someone that had a fire in his house. He's ultra-religious. I said, tell me, when the fire was holding every corner of your house, what did you do? You were reciting Psalms or you called the fire brigade? Said, I call the fire brigade. So there is fire now in the country. You have to serve in the army. That's as simple as that. Okay, now, I think that there is a likelihood that he will bring the collapse of the government. I think so because the truth is that there could have been a compromise, reasonable, responsible, fair, that will maintain a degree of equality between those who are serving in the actual fighting in the battlefield and those who are involved in all kinds of national missions which are very significant to the country, that the religious could take part of. But under the present circumstances, they don't even make the slightest effort to reach a compromise because they rely entirely on the commitment made by Netanyahu that he will surrender to everything that they request. So I believe that some of the members of Likud may, under these special circumstances, change their vote, and that will cause the collapse of the government.
And so the obvious question is, who would then lead an alternative government? The defense minister, Yoav Gallant, is a member of Likud. Do you see him or someone else as the next leader after Netanyahu?
David, I knew that you will come to this question knowing that I don't have an answer.
We have to try.
I'll tell you something. Look, all of the guys, the names that you hear every now and then on the broadcasts, on the press, on the television, they're good guys. Do I see someone that I say to myself, he's the kind of a guy that will make a dramatic change, that will change history? I don't know. I want to say one thing about this, which was my guideline for my entire life in politics. I really think that at the end of the day, the ultimate measure for greatness in leadership is the ability of the leader at a time when he has to take a crucial decision that will determine the life of millions of people, of his country, of his people, to do the opposite of everything that he promised he will do. The opposite. And I'll give you very fast few examples. De Gaulle in France was brought in to government in order to make sure that France would stay in Algeria. What did he do? He pulled out from Algeria and he was almost assassinated by those who brought him into power. Menachem Begin said all his life, all of Sinai, all of the West Bank will be integrated into the state of Israel. What did he do when he became prime minister? He pulled out from every single inch in Sinai and made peace, which was a dramatic contribution to the security and the strategic safety of the state of Israel, now 40 years old already. And Arik Sharon, I was his vice prime minister. Arik Sharon was the builder of all the settlements. There was a big clash between us and President Bush Sr. and James Baker. Because James Baker came once to Israel and he said, every time I come to Israel, Sharon builds a new settlement. I'm sick and tired of it. And there was a big row between us. What did Sharon do? Pulled out from all the settlements in Gaza that he built. Why? Because he knew that this is the right thing for the state of Israel. Do I see someone amongst all the contenders that have these strengths, the capacity, the leadership, the vision For the time being, I don't. But Israel is a country of great surprises. You never know, someone will emerge from nowhere.
Well, that's a good description of what's needed. So let me ask you to go back to the central question that we're thinking about today, and that's this terrible war in Gaza with all the suffering that it's brought to Israel and the Palestinians. What's your vision of what the day after looks like? How does this war end? And who's going to govern Gaza if not Israel on the one hand or Hamas on the other? How's that going to work?
Now maybe 6 months already that I said it. I said, let's assume, for the sake of our discussion here, in honor of David Ignatius of Washington Post, he may even quote me one day. Let's assume that we'll do that which I think is impossible, which is to eliminate every single Hamas. There will not be one Hamas fighter alive anymore. Yahya Sinwar, Muhammad Deif, all of them will be eliminated, killed. And then what? We will still have 6 million Palestinians. What are we going to do with these 6 million Palestinians? Does Israel want to remain forever an occupier of the West Bank and Gaza with 6 million Palestinians? Is it reasonable? Is it possible? Are we going to continue fighting and killing and being killed forever? That is why so many Israelis and Americans in administration are pissed off with Netanyahu. They say to him, okay, you said we need a couple of months. Now you got 6 months, now you got 7 months, 8 months, 9 months. Okay, what are you going to do when you conclude? What are you going to do? There wasn't yet even one discussion in the Israeli cabinet. And those who are partners of Netanyahu, not me, I am his rival, say he wants to keep the war going, and that's part of what I wrote today in the paper, so that he will not have to face the possible ramifications of the afterwards of what will happen to him politically. Now, what we have to do is the following, briefly. One, we have to stop the war now, today, yesterday, the day before yesterday, tomorrow. Stop the war now. The continuation of the war in Rafah, believe me, I know more than most people in the world, obviously, because I've been leading Israel into a war in Gaza also in 2008. There is nothing at this point that we can gain that is worth the cost of continuing the war in Rafah. We are going to lose more Israeli soldiers, which is a heartbreaking process for us. There are many Palestinians, innocent, uninvolved, which are going to lose their lives as a result of this. We are going to lose, to have a total erosion of the Israeli status in the international community as a result of the humanitarian crisis, which are part of this process. And we are going to lose all the hostages that are still alive. And then we will be without hostages and without that ultimate total victory that Netanyahu proclaims that he is up for. So what we have to do now, A, to stop the war. B, to have an immediate agreement for the return of all the hostages, and an Israeli commitment to pull out entirely from Gaza on one condition. And this condition is that we will agree with America, with the Arab countries, that there will be an alternative military security force that will take over from Israel in Gaza in order to prevent the rising up of Hamas again, which we all want to prevent because we don't want them to repeat what has been the source of this war in the first place. So if the Arab countries and the Palestinians are ready at this stage now to establish a military force that will be effective, they come in, we pull out, and we start a new phase of rebuilding Gaza and building up an international fund and maybe also building up a commission of bureaucrats and technocrats of the Palestinians that will handle this civil administration of Gaza instead of Hamas. And which I think is essential, we have to say to the Americans and to the international community, Israel is prepared to embark on negotiations with a proper Palestinian representation, whoever they choose to represent them, in as far as they are not terrorist organizations, Hamas, Islamic Jihad, or whatever, but they're representatives that recognize the agreements already signed in the past between Israel and the Palestinians, to embark on negotiations for a comprehensive peace treaty on the basis of two states, a Palestinian state alongside the state of Israel, which will be an introduction to the creation of and to the realization of the great vision of President Biden of building up the new axis made up of all the moderate Arab countries, Egypt and Jordan, which already have peace with us, the Emirates, which already have peace with us, Bahrain, which has a peace with us, and Saudi Arabia, and maybe more Muslim countries across the world. So this is what we need to do. This is my vision for the day after.
Thank you for that. That's the most comprehensive and straightforward assessment of that I've heard. So we're all wondering about whether the Palestinian Authority is ready to take part in this process. Just briefly, based on what you know, are you ready to move forward with Mahmoud Abbas? Do you think it's necessary to have new leadership before there's a joint effort with the PA to figure out governance?
Look, in 2008-9, beginning of 9, I presented the Palestinians with a comprehensive peace plan on the basis of two states, with a Palestinian state on the basis of the 67 borders. I said, President Abbas sat on the other side of the table, and I say to him, I beg you, President, sign it now and let's go to the UN and present it together and change history for millions of people. He never said no.
He never said anything.
Never said yes. Never said yes. And I said, in the next 50 years, I doubt that there will be one Israeli leader that will propose to you what I propose. Take this opportunity. Didn't work. Now you ask me about the Palestinian Authority. I think I am reluctant, always when I'm asked, I am reluctant to patronize the Palestinians and tell them who should represent them. They have to choose. You ask me, what is my assessment? Is the Palestinian Authority presently strong enough, powerful enough, determined enough to carry on? I think it has to be reformed. It has to add few personalities. Are there Palestinians that I trust, that are capable of leading negotiations together with us? There are. I am in contact with them. I meet them on a regular basis. I know that they are prepared. I think there must be something. Look, let's face it. There will not be any serious process if the two sides will not have leaderships that are prepared to make the move. There are not yet leaderships on both sides that are prepared to make the move. Not in my side and not in their side. What I'm trying to do with others, the guys that signed the article and the others, is to push the present government away from the landscape of our country so that there will be a leadership that will have the courage, the vision, the compassion, the patience, the tolerance to move forward, to take the risks, which are almost inevitable, but to offer a solution which is the only possible solution that can be, which is a two-state solution. And we will do everything in our power to encourage those amongst the Palestinians that will join in with us for such a process.
So we have less than a minute, and one more war that I need to ask you about. So you were Israeli Prime Minister during the Lebanon War of 2006. It was a devastating attack on Hezbollah. Many people think it's deterred war ever since. As you look at the situation on the northern border, all those towns, Kiryat Shmona, all the towns in the north that have been evacuated, do you think that another war in Lebanon is going to be necessary before Israelis can go back home?
I was the one that decided to take care of the Hezbollah then. And I think, as we said, it was devastating, but it brought silence for 17 years to the north. Now, as I said before, you have to do the opposite sometimes. What I think we need to do now is to reach an agreement with the government of Lebanon to avoid a war. If there will be a comprehensive war between us and the Hezbollah, I can say on the basis of what I know, it is likely that Lebanon will disappear, that it will be a terrible thing for them, and Hezbollah will disappear. But we will suffer more than we ever did in the history of the wars between us and the Arabs. So the truth is that there is not an interest for us and for them to have a comprehensive war. Therefore, I congratulate the efforts made by the American administration and Amos Hochstein, the emissary of the president, and the French, which are partly involved in it, to reach an agreement that will make some compromises on minor border disputes that exist for many years between us and the Lebanese. If they will be tolerant enough, if we will be smart and modest, and we may be smart, but modest, no, I don't know. But I think that if we will, then we can reach such an agreement. I've even prepared an outline together with one of the former heads of our intelligence, and I presented it to the French and to the Americans as my ideas of the outline for making peace there, which will present the Hezbollah with the appearance of an achievement that can justify, from their point of view, stopping the hostilities and moving out 40 kilometers from the border that will allow us to bring back all the Israelis that left their homes in the north. For us, it will not be a total victory, but the ability to bring back all the Israeli residents back into the north border will be a relative achievement that will balance what the Hezbollah will look at as their achievement. And this will spare us of the terrible, terrible prices of another war in the north.
So, ladies and gentlemen, Prime Minister Ehud Olmert,
thank you.
Rare chance to talk with you.
Thank you.
So I want to thank Prime Minister Olmert. You don't get more straightforward answers to questions about the Middle East that we just heard. I want to invite to the stage Ambassador Tom Nides and Ambassador Dina Kawar. Dina Kawar has been Jordan's ambassador to Washington since 2016, Ambassador, and served before that as Jordan's ambassador to the United Nations. She is a very wise and trusted emissary of His Majesty King Abdullah. It's great to have you here. Tom Nides is currently vice chairman of the Blackstone Group. He served as American ambassador to Israel from 2021 to 2023. Was Deputy Secretary of State before that. Thank you both for coming. I want to start by asking each of you the same question, and I'll start with you, Ambassador Kawar. It's a question I asked former Prime Minister Olmert, but we're just beginning to really talk about it. Tell all of us what you think the day after this terrible war looks like and how you see us getting there.
Well, many ideas are circulating by many parties in this conflict, including the US. And I think we have our own vision, our own ideas, at least, that I would like to share with you. But before that, I don't think any of the ideas that we have can work as long as we don't know what's in the mind of the Prime Minister Netanyahu. What he has for the day after will determine which idea works or doesn't work. But in briefly, we have this idea that we sort of shared with the US, which is to have an assistance mission, UN mission, that would go into Gaza and help out the Palestinian Authority in a period of 2 years that we can renew after 2 years. This would allow the Palestinian Authority to do its own reforms, to do better governance, to rebuild Gaza, to do the humanitarian aspects, and bring back Gaza on its feet. And then in 2 years, they can renew or not. Something similar that the Iraqis did with UNAMI. And this is the idea that we have, and that I think would help out everybody. It will help the Palestinian Authority regain grounds in Gaza. It would help, but that would mean that we need to stop the fighting immediately, withdraw Israel from Gaza, and make sure that we can start this new phase. Of course, one last sentence I'd like to add: nothing would work if we do not work on a process that the Prime Minister just mentioned, which I'm very happy to see, because this is the only condition for us to succeed. If we continue in this cycle, we will have another war in 2 years, 3 years. And this is not security for Israel, and it's not a life for the Palestinians. When we see the damage that has happened in Gaza right now, it's heartbreaking. And I think that one of the heartbreaking things that was mentioned before about the humanitarian part, about the Palestinian crisis, etc. But one thing that needs to be mentioned that was not mentioned, which is Israel is losing all of the Arab countries. And at this point, they have the treaty with Jordan, with Egypt, with Saudi Arabia was supposed to be signed, but with UAE, Bahrain, Morocco, and others. And right now, the Arab population and the Arab public opinion is so upset at seeing the images that we're seeing in Gaza. So this is really also a loss for any future for the region.
Let me follow up with one quick question before I turn to Ambassador Knights. One Israeli insistence, and it's not just Netanyahu that believes this, is that Hamas must be effectively demilitarized when this war ends, so that October 7 can never happen again. Does Jordan agree that a future Gaza, a future Palestinian state, needs to have that demilitarization so that that fear is removed?
I'd like to remind everybody in this room that Jordan does not have ties with Hamas since 1999. And so we believe that it is very important for the Palestinian Authority to be given a chance. But unfortunately, not only does this government not want the Palestinian Authority to go back to Gaza, but they've also undermined everything that they're doing in the West Bank. And so if they're undermining the Palestinian Authority, then who do they exactly want to govern? And that's a question that they need to answer.
And I hear you saying that Palestinian Authority responsibility, by definition, means demilitarization of Hamas.
Yes, taking over Gaza. And in steps, it will not happen in one day. Gaza is ruined. And I think there's a shock in the population that needs time to rebuild itself, to get back on its feet. There's a lot of humanitarian crises in Gaza right now, and we're not only talking about 38 almost thousand people dead, 85,000 injured, 1.7 million displaced. There is a hunger going on in Gaza in modern days in front of our eyes, and we're unable to do anything with the humanitarian aid. Right now, we tried as Jordan to make helicopter rides over Gaza and drop humanitarian aid. It's very costly and it's very ineffective, but we have to do it because it helps a little. But the easiest way to do it is through trucks and humanitarian aid. The US has tried through the sea. It has been very complicated and very costly. So really, these things are very, very important to start with.
So, Ambassador Knights, I want to ask you the same question about what your vision is of how this terrible war ends, what the day after looks like, and specifically, President Biden has worked passionately on this. Has he done enough? Is there more that the United States can do and needs to do to get Israel and the Palestinians where they need to be?
Well, first of all, David, thank you very much for having me. And Ambassador, it's an honor to be on the stage with you. I think most of us should know that Jordan is beloved by the United States Congress, by this administration. It's through your leadership and certainly the leadership of His Highness and the Queen and what Jordan has done, and by the way, stuck with Israel during an exceptionally difficult time for the Palestinians who live in Jordan, and the importance of the diplomacy that Jordan shows in the region. So I'm honored to be on the stage with you. And obviously the former Prime Minister, I spent an enormous amount of time with him. The guy's in very good physical shape, by the way, just to be clear. The guy's a machine. And he runs every day. It's crazy. Anyway, put him aside on that side, but he's a great diplomat and a very good friend. Let us be clear. We need to get the hostages home. Let us not forget there are at least 55, 60 mothers and fathers and kids and babies that are still sitting in Gaza. And Hamas needs to give those hostages back to their families. Number two, the war needs to end, without question. The war cannot end until we get the hostages back, but we need to have a ceasefire. There's no question about that. And the devastation that has happened not only to Israel, which will never be the same. Make no mistake, what happened on October 7th, Israel, the country, will never, ever, ever be the same. It would be like 350 million Americans would have lost someone in the Twin Towers. That is what the state of Israel is going through. But the war must end. And we need to work together to rebuild Gaza. And my hope is that people understand this war is not with the Palestinian people. And one of my frustrations with the current government, and that would be Prime Minister Netanyahu, is somehow they've defined this war with all a war is against the Palestinian people. No, the whole war is with Hamas. And as I agree with the ambassador, as we think about the future of Gaza, the future of Gaza is going to have to be the Arab countries coming together with a reformed PA helping manage and run Gaza. And I think there is the possibility, and I'm not one of these people who thinks about all the rainbows that can come after. A mutual friend of David's who has just had lunch, a guy named Rahm Emanuel, who's the ambassador to Japan, who's a very good friend of mine. He stole this line from Winston Churchill, which of course he doesn't admit doing, but you do not let a good crisis go to waste. This is one hell of a crisis. And out of this crisis, my hope is, my prayer is that we help rebuild Gaza with the help of the Arab countries, with the countries including Jordan and Egypt and the Emirates. And my hope is with and Qatar and Kuwait and possibly out of this, we're going to get a normalization deal with Saudi Arabia. The power of normalization, as Jordan knows, if we get a possible Saudi normalization, it could change the Middle East forever. And we're on the cusp of that. We have to get the war done. We have to figure out how we do. And let me just end one thing about President Biden, okay? I am obviously in the tank, so please, you should all understand this. But that said, there has not been a president of the United States who has done more for the state of Israel than Joe Biden. He is a guy who showed up 5 days after the war. He's a guy who sent the ships into the Mediterranean when Hezbollah started the first thing. He's the guy who sent the head of CENTCOM to sit in Tel Aviv when 300 rockets were being shot to Iran, who basically managed the attack on the state of Israel. He is the guy who told Hezbollah today, tomorrow, and next day, do not screw with the state of Israel. He has stood by to support the state of Israel, and I don't think there's anything more that Joe Biden could and should be doing that he's already doing and will hope to do to get this war to end and to help rebuild Gaza and the lives of the people that have been ruined.
But just want to press you because we've been on the cusp of ending this war with precisely the formula that you just laid out now for months, and we're not there yet. So what's the Tom Nides, Rahm Emanuel plan for getting the rest of the way? I mean, what more can the President of the United States, with allies do to close this deal so it's done?
So to be clear, the president 3 weeks ago stood up in a speech and laid out a 3-step proposal to end this war, okay? Yes, Bibi Netanyahu reluctantly agreed to it. Then he squirmed around, as most politicians do, about the facts. But at the end of the day, he basically supported the 3 steps, which would allow for the hostages to be returned and the beginning of a pause in the war, and ultimately to get all the hostages and end the hostilities, and we can begin this next phase. To be clear, Shinwar does not want this to happen. It was in his court, and the world, by the way, including the UN, agreed to support these, including Jordan. We believe that there was a pathway to peace. Listen, to be clear, Netanyahu has not been perfect, beyond not being perfect in the activities. And I have many of my anxieties and concerns, which I could articulate at a different point. But to be clear, right now the ball is in Hamas's court. Give us our hostages back, begin a process, and let's get this war over with.
So I want to ask both of you the question that I concluded with Prime Minister Olmert, which is my growing concern about the danger of war between Israel and Lebanon. And Dina, I'm going to be undiplomatic and call you that,
Please.
Dina, if I might. This is next door to you. The devastation would affect Jordan and the whole region. How do you assess, how does His Majesty assess the dangers of a war between Israel and Lebanon, and what do you think can be done now urgently to prevent it?
Well, the idea of another war in the region with Lebanon is something that we are so worried about. We cannot afford another war. You saw what happened in Gaza and its effects in the region, but also in the world. And so we think anything that might lead to this war to happen would be a crisis for the region and for the Lebanese, of course. And honestly, I think that there should be a bigger effort for any diplomatic efforts, because we believe that nobody wants the war, but everybody wants results and certain changes. So this is diplomacy, and we have to give diplomacy a chance. But unfortunately, the whole world is sort of a 2-year cycle. What you don't realize in the US is your elections every 2 years dictates the whole world. And I feel like right now, everybody's looking eyes at November and sort of deciding what will happen, who will come, what we should do, who is coming. And it's not that way that we should work. We should work something that is more long-term and that will help stop this. We're also very concerned about what is going on in Syria, which is our northern neighbor. And that's not very easy with the presence of militias there, with the drug dealing that we have to deal with in Jordan. And it's very heavy on our army, on our military and security. But if we let things go, it's a disaster for the youth in Jordan, but also in the Gulf states, because we're not the only targets in this process. So the whole region needs some cleaning and some work. But we're just in the middle of war after war after war. We need to just end this Gaza episode and not start another one, but look into solutions that would solve all these problems around us.
Tom, what would be your thoughts about how we prevent a wider war? That's an area where I'd give the Biden administration high marks for back-channel negotiations. We've actually been talking to Iran, as you know far better than I, for 6 months. How do you think this process is going? Do you think that the American diplomacy can avoid this war? Reading the newspapers, reading about the shelling across the border, it gets worse every day. What do you think?
So I agree with the ambassador. First of all, I don't think anyone wants to go to war. Listen, Israel doesn't want this. They'll do it if they have to do it. And do be clear, just put this in context. 200,000 Israelis are not back in their homes in the north. If those of you have been to Israel recently and you've been to the north, which I'm sure most of you who've been there, whole communities are gone. They've either been either shot by rockets or fires. 140,000 Israelis are now living in places in Tel Aviv, in hotels. Their kids are going to school. It's no way to live. None of us would tolerate to live this way. And so, obviously, the Israelis' concern and anxiety is real. However, Israel has no interest in going to have a full-blown war with Hezbollah, and I don't think Hezbollah and, quite frankly, their benefactor, Iran, wants to go to war as well. To be clear, Iran and Hezbollah understands one thing is for sure: America has Israel's back on this. And if, by the way, if Israel is attacked by Hezbollah, which is indirectly attacked by Iran, the United States will not stand by and let that happen. So everyone, there should no mystery. And part of it, as you know, David, better than anyone, diplomacy is carrot and stick. You can't do one without the other. And as you know, President Biden, who believes, rightfully so, he's, one of the benefits of him being so old is he knows more about this region than just about anyone. I've been in hundreds of meetings with President Biden in the Situation Room talking about the Middle East for the last 25 years. He understands the importance of making sure that we keep this contained, but also understands that the Iranians in particular need to understand when we send those ships into the Mediterranean, we mean business. There's always an argument, does America really mean it? I think they understand that we mean it, and I think it's in everyone's. It's the Jordanian people, the Israeli people, the innocent Palestinians. No one wants us to have another military confrontation in the north because it is going to be significantly worse than what we saw of the tragedies in Gaza.
Tom, I want to stick with you for a minute because you're famously a good political analyst. One reason it was
sometimes
it was great to have you as our ambassador in Israel was that talent. So I want you to put on your political hat and give us a sense of what you think is ahead. The Israeli Supreme Court just had a ruling this week. Some say will lead to the fall of the government. Benny Gantz has left the war cabinet and is calling for elections, but it's not clear when those would be. What do you think is the path forward? The polls say that Netanyahu simply doesn't have the support to continue as prime minister. Do you think a change of government is coming, and how's it going to happen?
Well, I am going to try to stay out of the details. But I'm obviously spending a lot of time talking to my friends in the Israeli government and all of that. My view is, first of all, the Israeli people will decide when enough is enough. The Israeli people will decide. It's a democracy. That's the one beauty about the state of Israel, is in even all of the tragedy we're seeing, it is a democratic society. Before the war broke out, remember, hundreds of thousands of Israelis were going to the streets every Saturday protesting judicial reform. We forget that. I mean, remember, Prime Minister was on the edge of being, elections even before the war, because that's what Jews do. They hand wring, they worry, they show up, and it's all generally relatively peaceful. We're at a stage now that there will be elections at some point. There's no question about that. Is it next month or is it 6 months? I have no idea. But be clear, if Netanyahu goes, it is not as if the prime minister, the government is going to be this left-wing government. That's ridiculous. Okay? It's a center-right country now after the war, probably more right than I would like to see. But I think the one thing is true when Prime Minister Bennett and Prime Minister Lapid was in the coalition. Coalition governments work. It's a balance. We need a coalition government right now. We need to get the crazies out. We need to bring the moderates back in. We need to think about Israel as what its beauty is. And remember, the country is 9 million people. 7 million are Jews. 2 million are Arabs. This is not, people forget what Israel is as a country. So it is my hope that the democracy will rise up, that the Israeli people will have to decide but we'll have a country where I think we could help rebuild Gaza, help think about a two-state solution, help us get and repair the damage that has been done through not only a war that Israel had nothing to do with, but the outcomes that we need to bring the country together, bring the region together, and hopefully put this in the rearview mirror and help us move the country forward.
So, Dina, I want to refer back to something that you hinted at, but ask you to probe more deeply. Prime Minister Netanyahu has said from the beginning that he would like to annex the West Bank. Former President Trump appeared ready to support the annexation of the West Bank when he was president, but was, thank goodness, pulled back from it. If Israel and the United States sought to annex the West Bank, would that mean the end of the peace agreement and the peace, real peace, between Israel and Jordan?
You're asking me the most difficult question. Why is that?
He gives me the softballs. I don't know what that's about.
Like, I'll tell you one thing.
Just wait.
Right now, I'm going to test my diplomatic abilities. Right now, Jordan is in a very, very tough position because the war in Gaza is making the population very anxious because, as you know, a large majority of Jordanians are Palestinians. And the other half is married to Palestinians, like the king says. So we're half this, half that. So basically, people are very nervous about this treaty and about what's going on. And as a government, we're responsible. And we feel maintaining this treaty right now is in hope for better days. But how much we can keep going that path is unknown. And you asked me about the West Bank, and thank you for asking me about the West Bank, because all eyes are now on Gaza, rightly so, but the West Bank is increasing day by day, the danger. And eyes are not there. We have 750 settlers. And when I speak to AIPAC sometimes about these settlers, they say, no, they're crazy ones and non-crazy ones. So they've divided it. For us, every settler is illegal. And now there's legal and illegal, and it's getting too comfortable. And our worry is that they're going into West Bank and East Jerusalem and creating havoc and taking the law in their hands. And this might be a very bad situation, not only for the Palestinians, but definitely for Jordan. Because our ties with a future Palestinian state depends on a peace path. And if Israel wants real security, because security is not armaments, security is having peace. And if they don't realize that the whole Arab world, including the Muslim world, will come to the table, if they decide to accept a Palestinian state, then that means they are masochistic or not responsible, and not responsible for their own people. So I hope that the voices in Israel that want peace will speak louder. And we need them more now than ever. And I think the Arab world needs to hear that as well. So this is a very difficult... have I answered your question?
Yeah, I mean,
let her off the hook.
Yeah, you have. I want to underline the importance of what Ambassador Kowar just said, that if we can get an end to this conflict in Gaza, the whole Arab world is prepared to sit at the table with Israel. That's an amazing thing to think about.
Yeah.
David, I want to just make one point, and I think it's really important to understand. I like to say it's a numbers game, okay? So Israel has 9 million people live in Israel. 7 million are Jews, 2 million are not. There are 3 million Palestinians who live in the West Bank, and there are 2 million Palestinians who live in Gaza. Last time I checked, okay, that's 7 million and 7 million. They're not going anywhere, and neither are we, okay? We need to figure this out over the long term. With the help of the Arab countries and Israel, we'll get to what we need to be.
Yeah.
So my little clock down here says we're basically out of time. I'm going to ask one more question of Tom. Sure. It's going to begin as a softball, but it actually has a kind of a curve at the end.
Great.
So one thing that people probably don't know about Ambassador Nides is that when he was ambassador, behind the scenes, he did more to try to stop settler violence in the West Bank and put the Israeli extremists who were coming down from the hilltops in masks and killing Palestinian civilians, put them at risk and find ways to sanction them. Tom, that was really something that I think needs to be recognized. What I want to ask you is it fair to say that members of this current government are supporting that settler violence, and how does the United States make it stop?
It's disgusting, okay? I don't care if it's one settler or one extremist coming down and beating the crap out of some innocent Palestinian, okay? And to support it is disgusting. And what we try to do is send a very strong message. It is, to be clear, it is not all the settlers. And the ambassador is correct about what's illegal settlements, and we can have a discussion about that. But the vast majority of settlers who are living in the West Bank, as much as I would not go visit them, they're not necessarily violent. But like in every conflict, it's like, this is when I said, this war is not with the Palestinian people. This war is with extremists, with Hamas. And when people kind of decide this is all with the Palestinian people, they make me disgusted as well. So I think the reality is the settler violence, I was a big advocate of putting not only constraints, but legal ramifications for the lunatics who decide they wake up in the morning and want to come down and burn olive branches and their trees. To me, that not only was a terrible situation, if you're a Palestinian living in the West Bank and having these nutbags doing this, you felt an unbelievable sense of terror. So I try to make sure we put some constraints on it. I think that this government, there are extremists in the Israeli government who have not denounced it as they should have and stopped it when they should, and that's something the United States and the Biden administration is attempting to try to make sure ends as quickly as humanly possible.
So, ladies and gentlemen, we need smart people with good ideas on both sides. It's the only way we're going to get out of this terrible situation. I want to thank Ambassador Kowar, thank Ambassador Knights, thank Ehud Olmert again. Thank you.
Thank you, David.